We're excited to have you here. My name is Megan Nicholas. I'm the director of the Career Center, and just a few quick housekeeping items. We have you on mute right now, so we have a small group. But if you could actually open up the chat box instead of the Q&A, and as you have questions, if you could please type those questions in, that would be great. This session is really about you and what your questions are. So while I have a few prepared questions, we certainly want to make sure that your questions are answered during this time. So feel free to write, go ahead and type in your questions at any moment. You don't have to wait till we're done kind of asking the predefined questions. I go by she, her, hers, and we're going to today have our panelists answer a few questions, share a little bit about their career journeys and a little bit about themselves. This is just the first program in a series of the career prep, finance career prep program that we're offering this summer. There'll be a number of other sessions. So next there is an MBA panel, which is coming up next week. And following that, we do have a basics in Excel that will also be occurring next week. And then we'll have an intro to financial modeling and then an overview of the interviewing and application process, which will also include kind of the timeline for the finance industry. So I'd encourage you, if after this panel you have an interest in finance, to join us for several, if not all of those sessions that we have coming up. So please let us know what your questions are. We're excited to have you here, and congratulations for really investing some of your time to learn a little bit more about the finance industry. Oftentimes, you know, Onyx and I were having a conversation and talking about how many times we hear from our peers or our colleagues about investment banking and don't hear about many of the different opportunities that are available within the finance industry. It's a rather large industry. And so today we just wanted to give you a really small snapshot of the vastness of this industry and this field. And so hopefully you'll hear about some different areas of finance that might be of interest to you, and it will be the beginning of kind of the exploration process, because there are many other interests of finance, areas of finance that we haven't been able to get everyone on the screen to kind of talk about those. So hopefully you'll be able to continue to explore, and at the Career Center, if we can help you with that exploration, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to help you identify resources and connect you with individuals. So to kick us off, as I mentioned, we're going to have each of our panelists, our guests who are with us today, introduce themselves. And so we're going to start out with Kate. Kate, if you could share your pronouns as well as your major at CC, a little bit about your CC experience and your career journey to date.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Kate DeFrino. I am a recent CC grad. I just graduated this past spring. I was a history political science major. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And at CC, a couple things that I was involved in. I was a marketing assistant for the athletic department, as well as a member of the Academic Honor Council. And a little bit about I haven't started my full-time job. I start in August, but a little bit about how I kind of ended up in the role that I'm going to be in. I actually had an internship at Morgan Stanley for the past 2 summers, which kind of led to this full-time offer. The internship after my junior summer was in prime brokerage, which is going to be the position that I'm going to be going into. And basically, on the first day of that internship, there was 5 of us within the specific group that I was in. And they told us on the first day that at the end of the summer, only 3 out of the 5 of us were going to be receiving full-time offers. So it was kind of like a 10-week interview process over the course of the summer, where you were expected to work on as a team with the other interns. But meanwhile, you also knew that only 3 of you were getting return offers. So you kind of have to figure out how to get one step ahead of the people next to you while also working on a team. So it was definitely an interesting experience. But that's a little bit about how, and then at the end of the summer, I got that offer. So I will be starting in August. that's a little bit about, I'm sure I'll talk more about it later, but I'll let the others go ahead.
Great. Kate, could you share what industry or what area of finance you're in as well?
Yeah, sure. Sorry. It's prime brokerage, which is under the equities division of the bank.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it. And Michelle, would you mind sharing a little bit about your background and your past?
Sure, of course. I'm Michelle McKinnon. I graduated from Colorado College in 1991, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And my first position, my first job after Colorado College was in investment banking at Merrill Lynch in the Chicago office. And I got that job through a friend who was 2 years ahead of me at Colorado College, and she was working for Merrill Lynch in investment banking, and she knew I had an interest in finance, and she basically introduced me to investment banking. And I only interviewed at Merrill Lynch. In those days, you interviewed your senior year and then you started, which is obviously part of the panel. We'll talk about some of the processes for these roles at the large banks and how early you have to start looking during your college 4 years. But in my day, it was, senior year. So I went to Merrill Lynch, and they had a training program in the summer in New York City, and every other person in the training program was from an East Coast school, and they had interviewed at Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and they knew the whole process, and they knew everything about investment banking. And I was this completely, I want to say naive, but I didn't know about the process, because my process was directly through, an alum, which I think Megan will talk about later. In many respects, that's, one of the best ways, coming from a school that doesn't have a large number of investment banking firms coming to visit. But anyway, I did investment banking for 3 years. Then I went to business school at Kellogg. And after business school, I went to New York and I worked for Chase. And it was a rotation program. It was an investment banking / sales and trading rotation program. So in my first position there was in high yield research, and I covered media and telecom companies. And I did that for several years. And then a group of bankers who had worked at Merrill Lynch that I knew from before business school moved over to Chase, and they were looking for investment bankers, and I was there. And so I went from the research side to investment banking. I did investment banking for another 5 or 6 years after that. I moved over to Lehman Brothers at one point, and then I had my kids. And investment banking is a tough long-term lifestyle. It's great for being an analyst. It's great for right after business school, right after college, but in the long term, it's a bit of a tough life. And so I moved over to work for one of my clients, which was Sirius XM Radio. And I worked in a number of finance roles at Sirius XM. I did internal FP&A, which is the budgeting and the forecasting. And every company out there, be it big or small, has these roles in financial planning and analysis. I also ran investor relations for Sirius. And just fortuitously through a friend, I was living in New Jersey, didn't really want to be commuting to New York every day. And I found out about a role at Honeywell, a big industrial company. They had a pension, and the pension invested in private equity. And I ended up being there for 11 years. It was fabulous. And I recently took a job, a new job in the same role, investing in private equity for a pension and an insurance company. And now I'm back working in New York doing that. So that is my story through various finance roles.
Great, thank you, Michelle. So as you can see, both Kate and Michelle have a very diverse range of different areas in finance that you could ask questions about. So AP, would you mind sharing a little bit about what you're doing, which is also very different from what we've heard so far?
Yeah, so I graduated, my name is Anubhav Prasai, I go by AP. My pronouns are him, his, her, him, he, him, his. Yeah, not used to saying pronouns, as you can say. Yeah, so I graduated Colorado College in 2017. And then right after college, I started working in a consulting firm, in a consulting role. So your, traditional type like management consulting type role, where I was a road warrior for 2 years. basically every week you travel to a different client or the same client, and then perform like, whatever is necessary. And I was doing a lot more quantitative work. So I was doing like modeling and analytics related stuff. So if you are interested in consulting, like case interviews and those kind of things, I can speak about that. From like, work perspective, I've worked with like tons of different types of clients, from airlines to retail to hospitals. So can speak a little bit about like the business aspects and how, how consultants work in those kind of environment. After that, I moved to New York and started working at Blackstone within their hedge fund solutions. So I do a lot more quantitative work now. So very much, work as a data scientist. Do a lot of like quantitative modeling. At CC, I was, I majored in mathematics and economics, and I'm probably one of the few people who actually uses their major and what they studied literally in class, like day to day. So I can speak about how you can use those skills as well.
Thanks, AP. I appreciate that. Onyx, can you round us out? Can you share a little bit about your background with us as well?
Absolutely. My name is Onyx. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I graduated from CC in 2018 with a degree in economics and a minor in Japanese language in the Asian Studies department. I was really involved in campus. It's funny because I think when you're going through it, you're kind of just doing things you're interested in, but looking back at it, everything that I do now is very connected, the thread that kind of runs through it all. It's fun to look back and see, so I look forward to that for all of you. But I worked in the finance department at CC and would suggest, if you're a sophomore now and you're interested in seeing how the business side of the college works, the school is a business. There are people who work in finance on campus, and you can go talk to them and see how that business works. There are tons of opportunities in the Spencer Center to go kind of get a peek under the hood, and it's fascinating. It'll give you a different lens of the campus. I also worked in the Summer Music Festival, which is a nonprofit part of CC, so a different type of business, and was a teaching assistant for personal finance, which kind of my heart song. I think financial education really unlocks the world for low and middle class income people. So there's a dazzle of a dream on the horizon there. But so some things that I did on campus, and then what did I want to do? I've always wanted to own a business. That's been number one probably since I was a really little kid, but also realizing I was not ready. I'm not ready to run a business currently. I wanted to go get some experience, see people who are really good at running businesses do it, and kind of grab some skills. And on campus found a passion for what incentivizes behaviors. So in the econ department, my focus was on financial crises actually, and the banking industry. I thought 2008 was just the craziest mind puzzle. How could we let something like that happen? And if you're interested, feel free to reach out. I can point you to a bunch of really fascinating videos and books to really unwind that puzzle, because it applies to a whole heck of a lot of what's going on today in just about every industry. And so from there, I played the numbers game applying. I wasn't super sure what I wanted to do, but I knew to own a company, I needed to raise capital, so it had to be lucrative. And I needed to gain a lot of diverse skills because I was going to be faced with who knows what problems along the way. So I applied to 117 different places and just interviewed everywhere I could, and basically said, where am I going to learn the most? The two things I was looking for was who knows the most and who has the most accessible brains. If they know a lot and they're total jerks, that's not going to work. If they're really nice but they don't seem to know a lot, that's not going to work. So I had to find somewhere where there were smart people who would let me sit at the table. And weirdly, it was a bank, which I was not expecting. After all of my 2008 research, I was not ready to accept an offer at a bank, but I did, and an asset management program. And so I thought, markets are ever changing. This is going to be so interesting. Every day is going to be different. And I started in institutional asset management and really quickly learned that the best thing for your clients is a strategy that doesn't change. You do it once, you do it right, and then you coax your clients to be comfortable. And that's the right thing to do. But it's not what I wanted to do with my career. So in the past 2 years, I've had 4 roles. I moved from institutional asset management, helping to rebuild their stable value put process. They sold off that business and I moved on to a sales team working with pension and nonprofit clients. Interestingly, a lot of the same problems, help them rebuild a lot of their pipelines. It's a lot easier to focus on one thing than 14 things with your clients. And they sold off a piece of that business. So then I had to go figure out who was selling these businesses and I joined that team. So that's how I ended up on the corporate strategy team at the bank. From there, I spent time on earnings calls, listening to CEOs talk about what was next for their companies, comparing our results, seeing where there were opportunities for us to grow. And on the first day of quarantine for my company, I actually moved into a new role to stand up a new go-to-market strategy for the bank. So my current career is focused on driving innovation and collaboration to bring our clients the financial solutions they need, which is a totally different lens than I looked at things 2 years ago. I'm kind of a consultant with one client, the bank. So a little bit of everything there, and I look forward to your question.
Thank you so much, everyone. So you all have an idea of what each of our guests today have done and a little bit about their career journey. So feel free to write your questions in the chat box. So you each described a little bit about your fields, but oftentimes, we hear prime brokerage, we hear asset management or investment banking, and we really don't know what the day-to-day looks like behind that. So could you take a moment to share a little bit more about what an entry level or someone who's coming into that field, what that day-to-day might look like for them, and then a little bit about those paths of progression. And I'm going to start, if that's all right, Michelle, if you don't mind, could you share a little bit maybe about the investment banking and your experience with Honeywell and what that could look like for someone who might be entering into those spaces, what they might expect, and then your journey was investment banking, MBA to transition to investment banking, sales and trading, and a rotational program. So maybe share a little bit too about what that progression, what the different progression opportunities might be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. So investment banking, you start with, I think in order to get a job in investment banking, you have to have a pretty good understanding of what the job actually is. And I've had this discussion with a lot of students over the years because it's such a competitive interview process. You need to sort of know what the job is before you interview for the job. So investment banking analysts typically work in an industry group. So you could be in the telecommunications and media group, or the industrials group, or the healthcare group, or the FIG, which is financial institutions, so covering banks. So all the clients within each industry group is, in that industry, and the investment banks help them raise money and also help them buy or sell divisions or the company itself. So the analysts are involved in the process of the raising money, be it through equity or debt or bank facilities, and also can be involved in helping the company strategically figure out how to sell a division or to buy another company. So that's the mergers and acquisitions role. And what analysts do is a lot of the analytical work to figure out valuation, putting together presentations that are used for the senior investment bankers to then present to these companies in the industry that they're working in. So understanding valuation is really important. And that's something that, I think when I was at CC, as an economics major, there was accounting and there was sort of macro and microeconomics, but there wasn't really a focus on that valuation piece, which is really, really important in investment banking. So that's, and day to day, because there are large classes of recent college grads, it's a great environment for, you work really hard, but you're around a lot of young people from a lot of different schools who are really smart and who work hard, but it's a lot of fun. So that's the day-to-day, you know, modeling, valuation work, putting together presentations, writing memos about, you know, recommending an idea. And I think in a lot of these roles in asset management and investment banking, there is a lot of writing a recommendation memo, recommending a transaction or describing, you know, a company that another company may be interested in buying, or so sort of. I think writing is a really important skill which you develop well at CC. And then in my day-to-day, you know, at Honeywell and now in my current position, which is similar, we're involved in investing in private equity funds and sometimes in hedge funds or credit funds. And again, for somebody junior in that role, it's a little harder. Most of the entry-level jobs in asset management, at least on the investor side, are you were an investment banking analyst and then you move into this, or you perhaps work at a company in a finance role and then something becomes available like the pension for you to move over. Actually hiring directly is a little bit more unusual, not unheard of, but it's a sort of second step, I would say. There are analyst positions at the larger banks and some of the banks that have placement departments that help place private equity funds, where they'll hire an analyst directly and put them into that area.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful. And also, AP, you know, we hear the term data scientist thrown around quite a bit in every industry and every area you can imagine. So could you explain kind of a little bit more detail about what you actually do as a data scientist in the financial space?
Yeah, so let me talk a little bit, like, so in consulting versus like in hedge funds, like those mean quite different things. So for example, like if you're doing a consulting and if you're doing like analytical work, it could be something like a price optimization problem, right? So for example, a client comes in and says, okay, I'm losing money on this. How, like, what do I do, right? That's the kind of questions that you're coming with. And then you're being, okay, so what kind of customers you're targeting, what are your marketing strategies, whether your marketing is working or not, right? What price should you sell this shampoo on? So you can run the gamut, right? And all of that, these days specifically, like, you know, people have, like, there's a lot of data, right? So, you know, companies like, you know, Walmart or, you know, your Rite Aids or like, you know, places like that, they have a lot of data on the consumers, right? So they can be very specific about who your target is and how you target people, right? So to make things a little bit more tangible, right? So if you get like a coupon, right? If you'll see, a lot of it happens to be like daily products that you use, like detergent, right? Everybody needs detergent. So if you give a discount on detergent, people go to the store. And once you go to the store, then you think of all the other things that you've forgotten, right? To buy, right? But how do you know it's detergent that people buy, right? And not shampoo, right? So it's about, you know, what kind of customers you're trying to target. It could also be something like, you know, selling what kind of credit cards you want to sell, right? So if you're like an airlines company who has your own credit card, right? What kind of offers do you run, right? So for example, regardless of whatever credit card you all have, right? You'll see that the first 3 months, right? You'll get added bonus, right? And a lot of that added bonus is going to be in restaurants and travel. There's a very specific statistical reason for why that is, right? Because you want people to associate using that particular credit card for happy memories, right? So once you start swiping for food and once you start swiping for travel, things that give you a lot of satisfaction, what happens is you start taking the same card out for a lot of other things that you don't associate with those memories. So look at your credit cards. Like, I don't even have to look at what those are. You'll see that restaurants have more points or cash back than other places, right? So, and there's a reason. So figuring those things out would be like, what you would be doing in a consulting group. If you switch to more on the hedge fund and private equity, those kind of sides, now we're looking here at risk evaluation, right? Doing a lot of like quantitative, like risk modeling. So you want to think about, okay, what affects the investment, right? So if you're invested in public markets, like, can I use so for example, like COVID just hit, right? So what's my exposure? So I've invested in a bunch of different things. How much can I potentially lose, right? There's a lot of like downside, like thinking about what your downside risks are. So if you're over invested in travel industry, right, then you saw a lot of losses in the past like 3 months, right? So how do you balance that? And like, what else can you buy to kind of hedge, right? So basically buy something else that offsets what you might lose, right? So figuring out those kind of things and doing it using like statistical models. So a lot of data science is just a more like sexier sounding word for doing a lot of statistical and mathematical modeling. So yeah, at the heart of it is, playing with a large volume of data and trying to get insight out of that. Is that
Great, thank you. Yes, I think that helps to clarify a little bit around what data science really is and what you do on a day-to-day. So Anik, you mentioned a little bit about you started over in the asset management side and then you kind of moved into the strategy. So for students who might be interested in this area, what would their day-to-day look like and how would that entry level progression look?
Sure. So asset management really was through a structured program. A lot of banks have a lot of what they call a development program. I'd look at those. Usually there's a lot of flexibility. If you're looking at a specific development program, they know that you're still trying to figure out what you want to do within that space because finance is huge. So usually there will be opportunities for mentorship. There's room for you typically to wiggle around if you find, maybe this isn't the right fit. They realize they're investing in their talent and it's a lot more affordable for the company to find the right fit for you than to lose you. So understanding the incentives of your employer, but also of yourself and finding that right fit will really help you navigate your company. And then I would say the other piece of that is mentorship. You want to find the people who are looking to help you succeed, knowing that you bring something to the table. So what are you good at and how are you helping? Will be really important. On the asset management side, that entry-level position, I'd say your job is kind of whatever they need you to do and having a good attitude. It's everything from, I have this really massive stack of cards from this client networking event. Can you get it into the CRM? And oh my gosh, no, that's not what I want to be doing at 10 p.m. But sure, absolutely, you got it. But that's also how you get on the really interesting projects that are like, hey, the executive of wealth management is noticing there's a change in this industry and one of our competitors is doing this. Can you figure out why? And what do you think it is that we have access to that maybe can help us compete? Those are the really fun questions. And those are the places where you kind of get to shine. And that kind of exposure will then provide more opportunities for mentorship and more opportunities for you to start navigating your company. I learned pretty quickly that asset management, while being a really interesting business, I think from the client perspective, wasn't what I thought that it was, and definitely wasn't professionally where I wanted to sit. And I was way more enchanted by those big picture questions like, what the heck are our competitors doing? And why isn't this business performing? And wow, I thought this was an awesome product. Why don't our clients think this is an awesome product? Is it the way we're communicating, or does the product actually suck? I thought that was just fascinating. So I, through mentorship and networking and a lot of conversations over coffee in the lunchroom, like those lunch spaces are so important. Make sure you're using them for more than just your sandwich. I found the strategy team, and that was the place that really looked for that kind of thought process. So if you're the kind of person, and I know there's a ton of them at CC, I think it really is a CC differentiator. If you find yourself connecting things that seem like maybe they shouldn't be connected until you really do bump them together, and then it's just like this aha moment, and that brings you joy, strategy might be a really awesome opportunity for you. And the entry level row, though, I gotta say, similar to what Michelle is saying, you work hard. I spent a lot of hours at my desk leaving. I usually left work the day after I arrived at work. It was a little backwards. So you gotta know, a lot of the investment into your career goes up front, if that's what you're looking for, and if this is a space that drives you. For me, it was worth it. The long hours, while they can be exhausting, I think were also exhilarating. Just knowing that, this is the time that you can pull that off. And in the future, I probably won't want to. There's going to be different priorities. But that entry level role gives you a lot of space to ask questions. Don't take that for granted, because it gets harder, I think, as people expect you to know things, to do that. So ask all of the questions, make mistakes, and then get better at it. I think the common thread across asset management and the strategy work probably was attention to detail. A lot of deck building, a lot of pitch decks, a lot of pages, a lot of Excel spreadsheets that I needed to leave enough notes for someone else to understand if they opened it. But yeah, does that help, Megan?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. Thank you. And Kate, I know I even misrepresented prime brokerage when we were first talking about your participation. So could you share a little bit about that field, and as well as about perhaps what you did on a day-to-day for your internship and how you anticipate that looking moving forward?
Sure, it definitely is a difficult group to understand, and it took me some time also. So basically, a prime brokerage is a group that offers a bundle of services to a client, which is normally a hedge fund. And these services can include like securities lending, helping with trade execution, and things like that. So basically, in the role that I'm going to be in, is I serve as the point of contact between the hedge fund client and all of Morgan Stanley's resources. So on the daily, I'll be working on a team of about 5 to 7 people, and I'll have certain accounts, which are clients. And I basically am just their portal into the firm and kind of helping them, making sure that their day-to-day is running as smooth as possible, and connecting them with the people within Morgan Stanley that they may need. So if they are interested in a certain product, I can connect the hedge fund client with that person within Morgan Stanley that can best help them make that investment. And during the internship, like I said earlier, it was very much an interview type program. I don't want to say we weren't doing actual work, but throughout the summer, you were sitting on one of those teams and kind of just learning what they were doing, helping them out where you could. But also throughout that summer, you were having assessments. We had two oral assessments, and we had 3 like big presentations that we had to do. So a lot of the time of that internship was preparing for those exams and presentations. Also, a lot of the internship was focused on networking and getting in front of people. I basically, they didn't tell you had to do this, but it was kind of assumed that you had to have a conversation, a sit-down meeting with pretty much everyone on that floor that we were in. So probably over 150 people. So a lot of the day was spent sitting down with those people, making sure that by the end of the summer, they knew who you were when you were leaving. I think also just one piece of advice riding off of what the previous people have said is that because this field, you need to know what you want to do early. I think it's important to leverage your connections in talk to your CC friends, ask them what their parents do. I didn't know what I was interested in, and I'm not, you shouldn't be expected to know either. But the more people you talk to, the more of a sense you can get what's actually out there in finance. So for me personally, I knew that I didn't want to be in a cubicle crunching numbers, but I knew that I wanted to go into finance because both my parents had worked in this field for 30 years, and it was kind of the center of our dinner table conversations, and it was something that was super interesting to me. But I knew that I wanted more of a client-facing role. I wanted to work on a team. I wanted to be on the phone talking to a client every day and like focusing on strengthening and building relationships for the bank. So that's kind of, after having a ton of conversations with people, I kind of realized that this role that I'm going into is one that I think leverages my strengths and is something that I'm super passionate about. So I think if I could give you one piece of advice is talk to as many people as possible, figure out what's out there, figure out what you're interested in early, because these positions, at least for the summer analyst programs, I had applied, gone through 5 or 6 interviews, gone through a super day, a full 12 months before I even started the program. So it happens crazy early, and it's crazy, but if you're interested, you got to do it and you got to get ahead.
That's a perfect segue, Kate. So I know that our attendees have a diversity of majors. I know we have a computer science major, we have an econ major, a poli-sci, I'm not sure about one of those. So knowing that there's this diversity of majors, what would be your advice for students on how they can kind of assess where might be the right fit for them? And what might be, as Kate gave her one piece of advice, what might be one of those pieces of advice that either you wish you would have heard before you graduated, or given your experience and where you find yourself today, that you would give to a student who is trying to figure this out? And whoever wants to go first can just raise their hand and we'll have you go. Onyx, you want to go first? Great, thank you.
This is my favorite question, Megan. I have 2. One is that, and these are things that I wish that I had told myself or someone had told me and that I wish I knew. I remember talking to Megan and sharing these with her, and she kind of said, well, but Onyx, would you have listened to yourself if you had heard that? And I said, no, probably not. But I'm going to share them with you anyway. And, you know, if you want to scribble them down and look at them in 2 years and we can laugh together at ourselves, feel free. But just in case maybe you're able to resonate with it now, these are the things that I wish I had known. One is, it doesn't become easier to take risks. You're only going to gain more responsibility. You're only going to become more settled, more comfortable in a certain area. Taking risks does not get easier, and you have a really, really wide field of opportunities right now. I'm not saying that doors are going to close, they certainly aren't. And there will be new ones that, you know, we don't talk about on the panel today, and maybe you don't hear about for another 10 years and you fall in love with something else, that's fine. But I would say search for some bravery in yourself, because this is an awesome opportunity to fall on your face for a few years at a time and be okay, and turn it into a really awesome chapter of your book that in the future is just something spectacular. So if you can find that bravery and just trust yourself to mold that narrative into something incredible, take that shot. I think that's really important. And the second piece, and this is something I still struggle with, is no path is replicable. I 100% agree. Talk to everybody that you possibly can. Learn how they navigated their life, their professional decisions, their personal decisions. Everybody's got some internal running dialogue, and some of it's going to connect and some of it isn't. But the more you hear and the more different ways you can look at it, I think that's really helpful. But what becomes tempting is to try to start looking at the equation of life and all of the inputs and try to optimize those inputs for some expected outcome. And if I do all of these things, then this is bound to happen. And that's just not the case. And I think my favorite thing I've noticed from really incredibly successful people is their stories are ridiculous. If you actually try to trace the path that got them wherever they're going, it doesn't make any sense, except in their specific situation. And it's not going to work for you that way. You're going to have to find your own path. And every single thing that you do is going to help you get there, and that's okay. So all of the hardest moments in your life, if you can take it like a chance to just trust yourself that it's going to go to something better, take the risk. I know that it's easier to shine from the dark spot than the light spot, and breathe. This is really hard. I'm terrible at this. But those would be my two things. Take risks, and no path is replicable. You have to find your own. So because of that, and I'll circle it all back, Megan, I promise. If you've got a different major and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't study econ. Most of the bankers in my firm did not study econ. I don't know what Jeff Bezos studied. I'd have to Google it. Ultimately, it's not going to matter as long as whatever you learned at CC helped shape the way you think about things to make good decisions.
Thanks. And Michelle, I saw you resonating with that. Is there a piece of advice or, especially for students who are trying to figure it out that you would give to them?
Well, I like what Onyx said about there's no way to kind of plan and that your career is going to take all these different turns and twists. And there are always things that are just not predictable. And I think when you start as a new college grad, you're in your first job, you just have to expect that, you may be in that job for 3 years, you may be in that job for 3 months. Always be ready to move and always be prepared with, a resume, always be talking to people, listening, never get stuck in the sense that you have to be in the same role and you're always going to be in that role, because things can change really quickly and easily, and there's no way to sort of predict the direction of it. There are people who stay in one role and career in one firm and they're there for 35 years. And I've worked with people like that. And there are people who move, fairly frequently. And you just have to have an open mind. But I think a lot of self-reflection in terms of what do you like to do and what are the kinds of things that make you happy, that the type of work. And Kate, you had talked about wanting to be in more of an outward facing, client role. So do you have the personality that you want to be using your social skills and your networking, and that leads you in sort of one area of finance? Or are you someone who likes to replicate a process, over and over again and become a true expert? If that's how you like to work, there are positions, for that as well. There are jobs that are, constantly changing, and there are entry-level positions, like Onyx mentioned, training programs at a lot of banks and corporations. Well, they'll have a finance training program, and you could start in the treasury group, and then you could be sent to the audit group, then you could be sent to planning and forecasting for one of the divisions of the company. So if you're interested in trying a lot of different things and sort of seeing what types of finance you like, those opportunities are available. But I think really understanding, like, how do you like to work? What kind of people do you want to be around? Do you like a lot of change and diversity in what you do, or do you like to be really good at something and, replicate that, quarter after quarter after quarter, in which case there's many jobs in corporations and investor relations and in equities and fixed income research, where it's every quarter, something different is happening to the company every quarter, but it's sort of a process, and that same process happens every quarter. And once you figure it out, you can, replicate.
I think that's very helpful and really good advice from all of you in terms of reflection and really thinking about where you find energy, and then where are those places within the industry that might allow you to excel. AP, do you have something to add for advice for students, especially who might be trying to figure it out, our computer science students or our poli-sci who are out there as well?
Yeah, a few actually. So I think, one of the most important things that I wish, I knew better when I was at school is preparation is really underrated. I like to say is the best qualified almost never gets the job. It's the best prepared that gets the job. So, I mean, is there no data scientist that's better than me that's doing the job that I'm doing right now? Probably not true. Right, but it's being there applying, going for it, and then preparing. Like I still get like resumes from students with spelling errors. Like you can't have that, right? So you have to prepare for the industry. Like, so if you're interested in consulting, you have students, think about who you're competing with. Like you're not competing with other CC students, right? You're competing with everybody else who is graduating at the same time, right? So, we have kids that have been practicing case interviews for the past 2 years, right? And they like know ins and outs, all the frameworks, everything about case interviews, right? And while you may be able to do the job just as well, if not better, right? If you're not prepared, you're never going to get the chance to show that. So again, I cannot understate like the preparation that you have to do, especially like in bigger companies where things are like quite competitive. That's one. The second is I see a lot of people like thinking about, oh, I don't know if I like Onyx kind of had like the right mindset. I feel like where she applied to a lot of places. Like if she had thought about, I don't know if I want to work in a bank or not, maybe I shouldn't apply. Like you don't have a choice, right? Like that's a thing that you think about once you have an offer in your hand, right? Once you have the offer, now you can actually make that choice. It's like, okay, I have the offer from the bank. Do I really want to work there, right? What is pros and cons? So I think, if something feels interesting to you, apply, like prepare for it, apply. Once you have the offer, then you can start making decisions on like, what you feel, whether that is something you truly want to do, especially like coming out. And again, like I also, kind of want to resonate what Michelle and Onyx said is probably they said it in a different way, but what you get into first is probably not what you're going to be doing in 10 years time. So like, don't freak out. Like if you get a job and then you don't like it, you can quit and get another job. It's the first job that's like really hard to get. Like once you have some experience, you can, frame that in a way that's suitable for the next job that you want. So like, don't discount any opportunity, like evaluate it and make sure that it's a real opportunity before saying, I don't want to do that. No.
Thank you. And Kate, you recently had to make these decisions even before making the decision of what internship you wanted to pursue that's led you to this postgraduate opportunity that you have. So advice that you have for CC students who are trying to figure this out and might be seeking a similar type of path.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna double up on what I said earlier about figuring out what you're interested in. I think that is the most important step, because if you do something you're interested in and that you're good at, you're going to be better at it, and it'll show that you're excited about it. Along the lines, I just wanted to mention this too, along the lines of making a good first impression, when you show up to an interview, it's important that you have prior work experience, even if you're still in college. And it doesn't need to be some crazy impressive internship, but even working at a restaurant or doing something like that. I can't even tell you how many questions I've had about summers working as a waitress or a hostess. So having prior work experience, and also dress for success. If you have any questions about like the dress code in the office or things like that, always be conservative, always be professional. It's better to overstep than understep in that situation. And then also make sure that when you leave an interview, the interviewer has no question in their mind about you wanting the job and you wanting to work at that company. It's very important that you get that across. You don't have to directly say, I really want this job, I want to be here, but through your answers, you should, by the time that you leave the interviewer should know how badly you want it. Advice for finding an internship, it's hard. It's really hard, but talk to as many people as possible. I got my internship after sophomore year from an old business partner that my mom had 10 years ago. And my mom knew she worked in the field. So I started talking to her and we were able to work something out, which led to my next internship, which led to my full-time offer, because I impressed some people along the way and I was excited about the work. So be persistent, work hard, talk to as many people as possible.
Right. I actually have a anecdote that I want to add to Kate's point on like how important like talking to people and knowing people is. So one of my favorite jobs when I was at CC was a tour guide, and I always took the parents group, and that was very intentional because people that want to send their kids to CC and can afford to do so are very successful. And that's how I got my first internship. One of the parents in the tour group, I was talking about my interest in like things that I want to do, and turns out that she was head of consulting for MasterCard for North America. So she was like, hey, like after the tours, she was like, well, why don't you when you're ready, send me your resume. I sent her my resume. She got my foot in the door, did the interviews and got the internship, right? So again, networking, knowing people, and expressing your interest is a good thing, and you should always do it when you can.
That's funny you say that, AP, because I actually also had a story related to networking. I think it's probably one of the most common threads that you're ever going to find of anyone who's gotten a job ever. So have a personal board of directors. But my first opportunities actually came from a visiting professor who I asked to lunch, and you should do that. If you haven't gotten lunch with all of your professors and visiting professors, when that opportunity comes around again, I highly recommend it. But maybe it's just virtual tea for now, because those people have had whole lives of experience, and they know so many people. They know all of the alums, they know all the alums' parents. Like, there's a wealth of community happening at CC if you tap it. But the way that I ended up with, I met this visiting professor and asked her to lunch. And from there, she invited me to attend a conference on the other side of the country. And from that conference, I decided that CC needed a women in business chapter. And so I stood one of those up, and from there was noticed by an admissions director for a summer program, and went to that summer program where I learned about consulting and finance and this entire field that I had no idea about. And that really opened the door for me for recognizing my interest in financial crises. So it is such a butterfly effect of just meet someone who's going to change your life. And the only way to do that is to meet a whole heck of a lot of someone's.
Thank you. I think that's excellent advice. So no matter if you feel like, oh, I don't have familial connections, I don't know anybody. I mean, if you look at this panel right here, we have a tremendous Colorado College community, both family members as well as alumni who are here to support you and to help you in that exploration process, and also in expanding your connections in your network. So remember that you have that. So we only have a few more minutes. If any of our attendees have a question, if you want to go ahead and put that in the chat box, we'll be happy to answer that final question. And as we're waiting to see if there's any questions in the chat box, any final comments that you guys would like to share with students, any final thoughts or pieces of advice or lessons learned, final words that you would like to leave with students. I'm going to start with AP and then I'll work around.
Yeah, my advice is like if you're trying to reach out to alum, right, do a little bit of research about like their company and like what they like, kind of what they do. Like everybody has LinkedIn, or like a lot of people have LinkedIn, and there's a lot of information about the companies, right? So if you're connecting to an alum with an intention of trying to get an internship or a job in that company, you're expected to know about it. And if it doesn't come off as such, right, it like I'm not as motivated to help you because you haven't shown me that you want it, right? So this goes back to Onyx and what Kate has said, because at the end of the day, if we recommend someone, we're putting our necks there, right? So if the person turns out to be bad, it'll hurt the next person we recommend, right? So think about, like, not just from your perspective, but from our perspective as well. If you're reaching out, is, you want to be, like, we all want to help you, right? But the initiative needs to come from you, and you need to show, you don't need to know everything, but you need to show that you want to know and you're willing to know.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Great advice. Onyx, any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
Yeah. Don't get ahead of yourself worrying. And that is so hard. That's so hard. Let yourself get ahead of yourself dreaming. I'm like 400 years ahead of myself with my dreams. It's ridiculous. I need a couple of lifetimes to get this all done. But in terms of worrying, I think it's easy to get in your own way. I know approaching graduation, I was like, gosh, I just have to get a job. I don't want to live out of my car, And if you can take a minute to just think about who you are and trust that you are not the kind of person who would ever let that happen, you're going to figure it out. And it'll give you some bandwidth to apply it towards those dreams instead of those worries. So try to do that for yourself. And if not, call someone on your board of directors to kind of kick your butt back in line and remind you of how incredible you are, because I am sure there are 50,000 reasons that anyone who loves you can remind you. And sometimes you need to be that person for yourself. But that said, you all have a CC education, and I really do think that it is so incredibly powerful because it's taught you how to learn. You did not spend 4 years, and by the time you're graduating, you will not have spent 4 years just cramming facts into your brain. You've gotten really good at piecing together disparate pieces of information and asking great questions, and that's going to serve you so much better, because I promise you, Excel is just muscle memory and unplugging your mouse. You'll get there. Learning how to learn is way more important. Good luck.
Thanks, Onyx. And Michelle, any thoughts that you'd like to share with our attendees?
So one piece of advice I have is to read the newspaper. Get a subscription, a digital subscription to the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or Barron's, and try to just be aware of what's going on in the world of business. And in reading about different companies and different industries, you may find something that lights a flame and leads you in a direction. I think when you're in school, there's a lot of focus on, studying for exams and social life. And as you're looking for a job, just being aware of what's going on in the world and reading a newspaper. A really great one is the Saturday Wall Street Journal. It's once a week. Just flip through it on a Saturday, and it might give you some ideas. Good luck.
Thank you. And I believe as a student with an EDU email address, you can actually get the online version of Wall Street Journal for free. So I believe you can sign up with your coloradocollege.edu email address. So great opportunity to take advantage of that and use your Saturday, or a little piece of your Saturday, to catch up, as Michelle had mentioned. Kate, any final thoughts that you have?
Yeah, I've given a few pieces of advice already. The only thing that I would add is that leverage the strengths that CC gives you. I know that when I showed up on the first day of my internship last summer, I was one of very few kids who went to a liberal arts school. Most were in the business program at their college. And that stressed me out. I thought I was behind. I thought that I was destined for failure because all these kids have been learning about nothing but business for the past 3 years. And I'm a political science major, so I haven't even been taking econ classes. That was not the case at all. I found that a lot of those kids weren't as strong in public speaking and weren't as good at working in groups and weren't as good at learning on their feet and learning quickly, which is all things that CC gives you. So definitely hang on to those things. And don't be discouraged if you're one of few that aren't very, have a very strong econ background, because you will be okay.
Thank you. And on behalf of our attendees, I want to give you a round of applause and thank you so much for joining us and sharing your journeys, your expertise, as well as your advice as our students and our young alums are looking at what's next for them and where they're going to go. On behalf of the Career Center, I do want to remind you all who are attending this that we are here to help in every way that we can. So please log into Handshake, schedule an appointment. You can find out about workshops that are coming up, as well as we have Tiger Link, which is a great opportunity to connect with our alumni community and those who have raised their hand and volunteered to have these conversations with you. So there's so many resources at your disposal, and I hope that you'll take advantage of those. And I look forward to also seeing where you, our attendees, go and the time when you'll sit on one of these panels for us. So thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.